Before we begin, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Amerixa Daily, and turn on the notification bell, because the stories we uncover here are designed to make you question everything you thought you knew. Let's start with something that sounds impossible. A man sits in a jail cell awaiting one of the most high-profile trials in modern history. Days after being found injured with marks around his neck, he tells prison psychologists, "I have no interest in killing myself." He says he wants to fight his case. He says he wants to go back to living his life. Officials later remove him from suicide watch. And then, weeks later, he's dead. Beat. Now here's where it gets strange. For years, people argued over what happened inside that cell. Was it suicide? Murder? Negligence? Cover-up? The theories became so massive that the story almost stopped feeling real. But recently, a federal judge unsealed a document that may completely change how people view the timeline. A purported suicide note. Allegedly written by Jeffrey Epstein himself after an earlier failed attempt. And the note doesn't calm the mystery down. It deepens it. Because inside this alleged note are bizarre statements. Angry statements. Defiant statements. They investigated me for months, found nothing. It is a treat to be able to choose one's time to say goodbye. No fun, not worth it. Think about that for a moment. A man publicly described as suicidal, privately telling psychologists he wanted to live. A prison incident that may have been self-harm, or may have been an assault. A cellmate once accused of attacking him, later claiming he saved his life with CPR. A note hidden from the public for nearly 7 years, suddenly released into the open while authorities simultaneously admit they cannot verify whether it's even authentic. This isn't just contradictory. It's almost architecturally contradictory. Every layer points in two directions at once. And that raises a much bigger question. Not just what happened to Jeffrey Epstein. But why does this case continue to produce confusion even when more evidence is released? Because normally, evidence narrows possibilities. It reduces uncertainty. Here, the opposite happens. Every new detail creates two more questions. Beat. And that's why this story refuses to die. Because the Epstein case stopped being just about one man a long time ago. It became something larger. A symbol. A psychological black hole where trust, power, media, institutions, and conspiracy all collapse into each other. Let's start with the obvious explanation. The simplest answer is this. Jeffrey Epstein was a wealthy, disgraced man facing life in prison. He had lost status, influence, freedom, and possibly hope. According to official reports, he attempted suicide once, failed, was monitored, then later succeeded. Simple. Case closed. Except, it never felt closed. Here's why. The public doesn't just react to facts. People react to patterns. And the pattern surrounding Epstein felt deeply abnormal. Security cameras malfunctioned. Guards reportedly fell asleep. Records appeared incomplete. His first injuries were unclear enough that even officials reportedly questioned whether they were self-inflicted or caused by someone else. Then there's the cellmate, Nicholas Tartaglione. A former police officer convicted of quadruple murder. Epstein initially accused him of attacking him. Later, Epstein recanted. Then Tartaglione later claims he saved Epstein's life. That sounds less like a criminal investigation and more like a psychological thriller. And when events pile up like that, the human brain starts doing something fascinating. It stops asking, "What happened?" and starts asking, "What am I not being told?" Beat. Here's where it gets fascinating. Conspiracies don't become powerful merely because people distrust authority. They become powerful because uncertainty creates empty space. And human beings hate empty space. Especially when elite power, sex trafficking, billionaires, politicians, intelligence rumors, and sudden death all collide inside one story. The Epstein case became the perfect storm for public suspicion because almost every element of the narrative contains ambiguity. Think about it. If someone dies by suicide, people usually expect emotional collapse, visible despair, obvious warning signs. But Epstein's reported statements to psychologists complicate that image. "I have a life and I want to go back to living my life." That sentence alone created cognitive dissonance for millions of people. Because now the public has two conflicting realities sitting side by side. Reality 1, a suicidal man. Reality 2, a man insisting he wants to survive. And when people encounter unresolved contradiction, they instinctively search for hidden explanations. Beat. But here's the twist. Contradiction does not automatically mean conspiracy. Sometimes contradiction is exactly what reality looks like. Human beings are inconsistent. Fear changes people by the hour. Trauma changes perception. Powerful institutions make mistakes. Witnesses contradict themselves. Memories fail. Real life is messy. And yet, the Epstein story feels different because of the scale of influence surrounding it. This was not an ordinary defendant. This was a man connected to billionaires, royalty, politicians, academics, celebrities, and global elites. So when gaps appear in the story, people don't see ordinary uncertainty. They see potential protection. And once that idea enters public consciousness, every missing detail becomes emotionally explosive. A broken camera no longer feels accidental. A missing minute no longer feels procedural. An inconsistent statement no longer feels human. Everything begins to feel intentional. Beat. Now let's talk about the note itself. Because this is where the paradox becomes almost surreal. The Department of Justice reportedly did not oppose releasing the note publicly. But at the same time, officials stated they could not verify the factual accuracy surrounding it. Think about how strange that sounds. A document important enough to unseal, but uncertain enough that authorities won't stand behind it. That ambiguity alone guarantees controversy. Then there's the language of the note itself. It doesn't read like a calm goodbye letter. It reads emotional, defensive, bitter. "They investigated me for months, found nothing." That line matters psychologically. Because it suggests grievance, frustration, defiance, not surrender. And that's important because the public unconsciously expects suicide notes to sound emotionally coherent, reflective, final. But this alleged note feels chaotic, almost argumentative. Which again feeds the central contradiction of the case. Nothing fits cleanly. Beat. Here's where the story becomes less about Epstein, and more about us. Because this case revealed something profound about the modern world. People no longer trust systems simply because those systems are official. That era is over. Today, trust has become fragmented. The government says one thing. Media says another. Online investigators analyze body language, timestamps, camera angles, handwriting samples, leaked files. Millions of ordinary people now behave like decentralized detectives. And technology amplifies everything. A rumor can reach 50 million people before an official statement is released. A blurry screenshot becomes evidence. A missing detail becomes a global obsession. And once suspicion reaches critical mass, no explanation ever feels complete again. Beat. Think about what makes the Epstein story uniquely powerful. It combines three fears humans are biologically wired to obsess over: sex, power, and secrecy. That combination is irresistible to the human mind. Because secrecy around powerful people triggers something ancient in us, the instinct that hidden hierarchies may exist beyond public view. Whether true or not, the emotional reaction is extremely real. And that's why even after official conclusions were announced, the story kept expanding, not shrinking. Most news stories fade because certainty eventually stabilizes public attention. The Epstein case did the opposite. Each new revelation destabilized it further. The released note, the prison failures, the contradictions, the elite connections, the unanswered questions. Together, they created something larger than a criminal case. A modern myth. Beat. And myths are powerful because they stop functioning purely as facts. They become symbolic. To some people, Epstein represents elite corruption. To others, institutional incompetence. To others, media manipulation. To others, collective paranoia. But notice something important. Completely different groups all project different meanings onto the same event. That's why the case persists. Because people are no longer arguing only about what happened in a jail cell. They're arguing about whether modern institutions deserve trust at all. Beat. Here's the human story buried underneath all this. Imagine an ordinary person watching this unfold. A teacher. A nurse. A father scrolling headlines late at night after work. They see powerful people connected to scandal. They see incomplete answers. They hear officials say there's no evidence of murder, while social media insists something feels wrong. And slowly, something shifts psychologically. Not necessarily belief in conspiracy, but erosion of certainty. The feeling that reality itself has become harder to verify. That maybe information is curated, managed, filtered. And once that feeling enters society, it spreads far beyond one case. People start questioning everything. Elections, media, corporations, governments, experts, even video evidence itself. The Epstein story became one of the first truly modern conspiracy ecosystems of the digital age, a place where institutional authority and internet skepticism collided in real time. Beat. Now, does that mean every conspiracy theory is true? Of course not. But dismissing public suspicion entirely misses the deeper issue. Because distrust itself has become one of the defining emotions of modern civilization. And stories like Epstein act almost like mirrors, reflecting that distrust back at society. That's why the newly released note matters even if it changes nothing legally. It reignites the emotional contradiction at the center of the story. A man who supposedly wanted to die, telling people he wanted to live. A government releasing evidence, while questioning its authenticity. A public demanding transparency, while believing transparency itself may be manipulated. Everything folds into itself. Beat. And maybe that's the real reason this case still fascinates the world. Not because people are obsessed with Jeffrey Epstein himself, but because the story forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. In a world flooded with information, how do you know what's actually true? Because decades ago, people assumed more information would create more clarity. Instead, the internet created something stranger. Infinite interpretation. Now everyone sees the same facts through completely different realities. One person sees suicide. Another sees murder. Another sees systemic incompetence. Another sees elite protection. And all of them believe the evidence supports their side. Think about how extraordinary that is. Beat. Here's the final twist. The Epstein case may never fully resolve in the public imagination, not because evidence doesn't exist, but because the story evolved beyond evidence. It became emotional infrastructure. A symbol people use to process fear about hidden power in the modern world. And once a story reaches that level, facts alone can no longer end it. Because the mystery is no longer just inside the prison cell. It's inside society itself. The collapse of trust. The fragmentation of truth. The suspicion that powerful systems operate by rules ordinary people never get to see. And once you recognize that, once you see how uncertainty, secrecy, media, and psychology combine to shape public reality, you start realizing the Epstein story was never only about one death. It was about the terrifying possibility that in the modern world, the line between truth, narrative, and perception has become almost impossible to separate. And once you see that, you never look at headlines the same way again. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Amerixa Daily, and comment below with your own thoughts about the Epstein mystery. Because here on Amerixa Daily, we don't just report the news, we uncover the hidden questions behind it.